Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. So welcome to another webinar series by CADe-Lead UPM. So how's everyone today? Teaching plan dah submit belum? Dah mula submit kan untuk teaching plan? Alright, and kita we have another series of webinar today. And we have our speaker today, Dr. Aini Marina. And I guess please may we introduce briefly Dr. Aini Marina as our speaker for today's session. Okay. Dr. Aini Marina Ma'ruf from the Faculty of Educational Studies is an educational psychologist and learning scientist at UPM. Specializes in designing meaningful learning experiences for diverse learners, including the neurodivergence. Yes, she preaches psychology and the learning sciences to advance understanding of how people think and learn. Recognized with the Undergrad Fellowship Knight Chancellor 2018, she has served as UPM jury for National ACRE Award, advised the Ministry of Higher Education on the curriculum innovation, and consulted UNESCO on digital and socio-emotional pedagogies. Wow. She now leads the Psycho-Educational and Learning Assessment Lab at UPM. So I guess without further ado, please welcome our speaker for today on the topic Learning Through Experience, Unlocking Practical Insights. So Dr. Aini Marina, please welcome. The floor is yours. The session is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Associate Professor Dr. Masnida. I thought that in UPM, I'm like one of the fastest talkers in town until I met you. Rupanya you pun jenis cakap laju macam tu. All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, friends. Let me just kind of like pull my slides for a bit. Okay, hold on. I think it's this one. And content only. Okay, Dr. Masnida, can you do like a quick check and see what's on the screen? Can you see like the full slides now, or hold on? Sekejap ya.
It's not in presentation mode yet.
Is it in presentation
Okay.
mode now? Okay, all right. I am just gonna do some small housekeeping here to make sure things are okay. All right. Dr. Masnida, if you somehow lose me along the way, just grab the mic and say that, I can't hear you or something, okay? All right.
Okay.
Kan takut nanti cakap seorang-seorang.
Okay.
Okay. All right, okay. Let me just like really quickly, because I need to somehow see things. Okay, semua nampak the full slides, right? Betul? Yes, Dr. Masnida? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, I can see the feedback. Right. This is why like online training isn't really my forte, but we'll make do. Okay. So hello again, friends. The title given to me today, to share with you guys in like more or less in 2 hours, right? Is on learning experience. So the topic given to me was learning through experience, unlocking practical insights. So the keyword I think for today is experience and practical insights, which means that this is not kind of like a theory heavy session. It's just kind of like somehow me sharing what I have and what I know a little bit as an educational psychologist. And helping us all prepare for next week, right? We have our first class next week, and I am yet to prepare my teaching packets. All right, so here goes. Kejaya. It's not, okay. I think the basic or the main question that I will be covering today is why learning through experience is a non-negotiable thing. right? I know Kate has done a lot of trainings on heuristical tools, with Dr. Salah, with Dr. Chong, and Dr. Chong is now like rolling out the AI training, making sure that UPM is on board as AI agents and so on, and with ethical and professional use of AI and so on. But today I would like to sort of invite you all um, to the foundational part of teaching and learning as a learning scientist myself. So I'm an educational psychologist, but within educational psychology, I focus on the learning sciences. I was trained in the cognitive sciences. So it's pretty much about cognitive psychology and how people reason, how people think, and how those actually affect the learning processes, and knowing how people think and reason and do things or not do things, how people remember or not remember things, right? That's how we actually inform our teacher training programs, how we design curriculum, how we design the delivery processes, right? Trying to make students more immersed in their learning experiences, as well as effective and efficient assessments, right? So there's the curriculum, there's the teaching, and then the assessment. So today, instead of like showing you like what are the tools that we can use to improve learning experiences of the students, I would like to kind of like take you to kind of like the sciences behind things. But before that, hold on. But before that, I would like to somehow, like when we give talks or we give trainings or when we write something like in academic writing, we have like a lens to it, like from what angle am I talking this through, right? So I'd like to somehow just like gloss through the Excel framework. So this is where my talk is situated in, and this is where I align my talk with, right? So Excel is somewhat like a framework. Back in 2021, KPT, the Ministry of Higher Education, they came up with, knowing that learning experiences, experiential learning actually significantly impacts learning outcomes, right? So KPT, or the Ministry of Higher Education, has always been about coming up with better curriculum offers. So Excel is one of those things which is being rolled out in phases. So there are four thrusts. The ideal is one where we design experiential learning experiences for the students in terms of industry driven. And then there's the care, which is the community driven. So some courses or some programs in our universities, right? They're more community based. So, the way we design the curriculum, the way we design the teaching and learning and the assessments are more community driven. And then there's the inquiry based. So courses like biotechnology, chemistry, physics, all those like hardcore STEM courses could be like more on inquiry-based learning. So they have, we kind of like um, narrow down or kind of like engineer the learning experiences, right, to focus more on the inquiry base. And then the one that I did for KPT was under the personalized experiential learning. So it means that not all students actually want to learn in a standard rigid or in a constricted learning pathway. So they want to be more flexible in what they want to become, or maybe like after they got a degree, then they would then decide like what I want to become. So there's that personalized experience. So what I'm saying here is that no matter what you do in your classrooms, you need to kind of like have this bigger idea about where your teaching actually fits in the grand scheme of things. So this is one of the big frameworks at the ministry level. All right. And then that framework just now, right? This one is at the ministry for the students in terms of the curriculum, right? And this is UPM's way of translating that framework in the UPM ecosystem. So CADe has actually come up, I think, under the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academic and International Affairs when it was Prof. Iqbal's time. I think it was 2021. CADe came up with this framework, the Putra Creative Competency-Based Training in Teaching and Learning. So what this actually means is that if Excel was actually dedicated for students, we then came up with this framework on how we need to train our lecturers, to translate that Excel framework in the university. So we have the academic governance, ethics, and professionalism. So if you actually head over to CADe's, if some of you, if you're like me and you just found out about this thing, if you head over to CADe's website, you will actually see a lot of playbooks, and you can find the playbook on CBT-TNL in there, right? So it actually tells you how, if you actually look at the frameworks, it has these 5 pillars, and then it will tell you like there are steps along the way, along your career, along your academic journey on these 5 things on for each stage, how you can actually become better and better and better for the ethics and professionalism in terms of curriculum design and management, in terms of the delivery that I said just now, right? And assessment. And then part of it, like becoming a good educator, becoming an expert educator, right? You cannot not do educational research. And then we also have the supervision, mentoring, and extension. So it's a beautiful framework. It's really well thought of. And today's session is pretty much like giving you a background picture to kind of like, if you want to achieve these things, you have to actually think about these things as well, the micro processes of it. All right. Okay. So now my talk is divided into 4 parts, I think, 4 parts. So part 1 is where I want to kind of like share a little bit of the sciences of why I believe as a learning scientist, experience is what makes learning stick. So for the first part of the talk, we will look into students, right? And then for the second part, we'll look at us as the educators. I don't really like calling lectures because, it's 2025 and, we're not only lecturing, right? So focusing on the students and as well as the lecturers. So the keyword here is experience is what makes learning stick. And for that reason, that is why it is non-negotiable. All right. So let me see where the notes are. All right. So now let me start with a claim that it might feel obvious, right? But the thing is that when we keep on talking about experience, let's improve students' learning experience. Let's improve, the outcomes by giving them more things to do, right? But most of the time, it is often like said than practiced, right? But what I wanted to highlight here is that when you talk about experience, it's not just about the content of your curriculum. It's not just about the slides. It's not just about explanations like what I'm doing right now, just keep on talking and talking, right? But experience is something that you engineer that it will then kind of like, stay well long enough in the working memory and go back into the long-term memory enough for you to then be able to recall it back, and not only just recall during the exams, but also to transfer it. So if I can put it simply, right? Let's say like in school, we learn maths, we learn additions, we learn to count first, right? We have to learn the numbers, and then from understanding how to learn how to recognize numbers and remember numbers, we then learn how to do additions. And when we understand additions, we then transfer it to subtractions, right? And then when we understand addition and subtractions, we then do slightly more complex mathematical problems. And then we start learning the concepts of multiplication, right? And when you understand multiplication, you then learn division. So that's kind of like a transfer from one concept to another concept, and it builds higher and higher until eventually you then learn algebra, you learn calculus, and so on. And then when you get to university, if you're in an engineering program, you will then learn engineering maths 1, 2, 3, and so on, right? So that's where, that thing is called learning transfer. So in other words, when you talk about learning, when you talk about teaching, you're not just only like delivering something, but you're delivering something long enough for it to be remembered, to stay in the head, for it to be recalled, and for it to be transferred. Now, for the most part, most often than not, and especially in Malaysia and in Asian countries especially, right, we focus a lot on procedural knowledge, right? Procedural knowledge would mean, how do you do addition? How do you do subtractions? And then when you combine them together, how do you do it, right? And then when you get to a higher level, like grade 4, grade 5, you will then combine those concepts and, multiplication, division, and we solve problems. But most often than not, it's like, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? And it goes all the way until SPM. SPM is in O levels for those of you who are from the international background, right? Now, when you actually focus only on the procedures, how to do it, right, instead of really understanding it, the conceptual understanding of things, right, this is where learning fails. This is where straight A students in SPM, in O levels, IGCSE, when they get to universities and get accepted into engineering programs or computer science programs, or in fact, even psychology programs, right, they fail engineering maths simply because of the fact that engineering maths requires conceptual understanding, deeper understanding about the concepts, right? So it's the concepts that's equally as important as the procedures. So our schooling system normally just focuses on, if you actually answer this correct, this is the mark that you will get. And for this question, there's actually 5 steps in doing it. So those are all procedural knowledge, right? So again, if you want learning to happen, like remembering, recalling it, and then transferring it, right? It actually has to have that procedure and the conceptual understanding, right? And these two can only stick, right, if you actually give them meaningful learning experiences. Now, I want to ask you for a bit before I change to the next slide, right? If you can recall, your schooling experience, right? What are the things that, stick in your head about the subjects that you learn from school? It can be anything. Can you kind of like write in the chat box really quickly so I can know? You all can actually comment in the chat box, right? Meeting group chat. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask again, right? So if you try and recall, right, an experience back in school, what do you remember at all? Like what strikes you, back in school? If I can start, right? If I can start, I remembered like, and this wasn't when I was in grade 6. And grade 6 was like eons ago. It's like decades ago, right? I'm old. I remember in grade 6, right? English has always been my favorite subject, right? The only thing I remember from my English class in grade 6, again, it was like almost 30 years ago, I think. Yes, it's almost 30 years ago, right? Was that the teacher would always, penalize us if we don't bring our worksheets to class and to school. Right. And one worksheet, if I don't bring one worksheet to school, it will cost me 1 ringgit. And my duit belanja back then was really 1 ringgit per day. So, being the absent-minded that I am, most of my money will actually go to paying the teacher 1 ringgit. And fast forward to several years later, I have this sejarah teacher, the history teacher, right? Who claims that she's so good in teaching history, right? But back then we always have this monthly test, monthly test. And history included. So for our monthly test, our history teacher would say, if you don't get 80, you will have to do the duck walk. Has anybody ever done the duck walk? Jalan itik. And this is like in Form 3, 15 years old. And the girls will actually have to lead the duck walk around the class, followed by the boys. It was a core memory that I'm 40 this year and I still remember it and I still despise the teacher. You see, nothing about the history teaching, nothing about, that's the experience that I got in the history class that stuck with me. That was the experience that I got in my English class that stuck with me, And then when I got to was it Form 4 or was it Form 5? I think it was Form 4. Form 4 is 16 years old. uh, Hitan, you said standing outside the class on the chair on the table, Rotan. Exactly. That same history teacher of mine, if you don't finish copying the history your history notes from the history book, for heaven's sake, copying from the history textbook, right? If you don't finish it, for those of the students who don't finish it, you actually have to pinch your friend's cheeks. And if the second time you don't finish it, you will actually have to stand on the table, on the chair. And the next time around, if you don't finish it, you have to stand on the table. Basically, that's kind of like the experience in my history class. Now, in Form 4, I remembered there was a physics teacher, right? I do believe he's super brilliant, right? But again, teaching is different from, knowing a lot of things, right? Is different from knowing how to teach it. These are two separate skills, right? Knowing it in your head is one thing. Trying to simplify things, right? Enough for the learner to understand is a whole different skill. And let me tell you again, as a learning scientist, right? If you're known as a lecturer, who's always super complicated about things, right? And who takes, if you're happy and proud about students not understanding your lesson because you claim that your lesson is something that's just really out of the world, it's like, it's like astrophysics or something like that, right? Then you're not a good teacher. No matter how complicated your subjects are, no matter how abstract your subjects are, no matter how boring you would say they are, right? There is no such thing as a boring, useless subject. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in the curriculum. There's only just lazy teachers, and incompetent teachers who don't exactly understand well enough to simplify their teaching. All right, that's something that I want you to take with you. I need you to let that sink in. A good teacher is always someone who is always, always able to simplify things enough for the learners to understand. And you need to know like what level your learners are. All right. Now going back to my history, my physics teacher. Remember, this was like we're from Form 3 and we survived PMR. I was from that generation, the PMR generation. And then we go to Form 4, the science stream, and then this physics teacher, right? Again, super brilliant, but you have no idea what he's teaching. The only thing I ever remembered from that physics class or from the year of learning physics from him was that he was drawing on the whiteboard what appeared to be like a graph, right? And then it was like on top of the graph, it was like sheeps. Kambing jatuh gaung. Kambing jatuh gaung. I have no idea what that is. It's like in English, it's like there's sheep and these sheep are falling off the cliff. These sheep are falling off the cliff. And if you ask me like what topic was he teaching, I have no idea. But that was the experience in his class. Well, of course, I have like a long list of things that I can share. But my point here is that at the end of the day, right? What sticks with the learners is the experience. What sticks with the learners and what they will remember or not remember about you is the experience. It's not your slides, or maybe they will remember that your slides are super boring, or maybe they will remember that your slides are just like, I don't know what this is, right? Or maybe they'll just remember like all you did was just yap in the class, like what I'm doing right now, right? So again, they won't be remembering the content. They definitely won't remember what exactly you say, right? Or, but they will definitely remember how you made them feel, all right? And that's kind of like what it's my slides is like stuck. Well, that's kind of like what I wanted to kind of like unpack with you in this simple model here. All right, so this is what I teach undergraduate teacher trainees at the Faculty of Educational Studies and the Faculty of Sciences, because we also have science teachers training, right? About how the brain works, right? How the brain processes information. Dr. Masnida would know this because she's a computer scientist, right? So how the brain processes information, how it actually stores it or not store it, right? And why it's really important for you to really focus on designing, right? Or affording students with meaningful learning experiences. All right. So this is the working memory model. This is not an anatomical model of the brain. It's not a physiological one, right? But this is an analogy in cognitive sciences and in cognitive psychology on how the brain works. And if you want to know like where exactly this thing happens, it's pretty much like behind your forehead, all right? Behind your prefrontal lobe, all right? Prefrontal cortex here. So the working memory. Okay. Let me see my talking points so that I don't go overboard with the time. So now, when when students listen, right? When you talk, when you teach, right? So we process information using the five senses. See, okay. You know what? I kind of like need to see the screen so I know like I'm talking to someone. Okay. All right. So when students take in information, they will actually use their senses, and we have five senses, right? So when we have when we have the vision, we have the hearing, we have the taste, the smell, and the touch. So all these things, right, will then get into the working memory. So the working memory, you can imagine it as if it's like in what do you call it? In a company, we have an executive board, right? And there's this boardroom, and this boardroom, we have a CEO that gets to call the shots. So in working memory terms, we have what is called the central executive. So it takes in all these information, and then depending on what kind of information gets in, whether it's visual input or it's audio input, like what you're seeing, like if you're looking at me right now, so there's this visual input. If there's this auditory, my voice is auditory, right? You can't touch and smell me though, but you can smell your coffee, whatever that's in front of you right now, whether it's roti canai or wherever you are, right? You can smell and you're taking in the environment, right? And then there's the touch, right? And then there's the smell. Okay. These five senses. So depending on what they are, your CEO will then transfer this information into the board members. So like in a board, you have a CEO, you have a COO, you have a CFO, what else? The CIO, right? So whatever that's auditory gets passed on to the phonological loop. Whatever that's visual and space and so on get passed on to the visual spatial sketchpad. And then there's this guy called the episodic buffer who will then kind of like, oh, Dr. Marina is talking and she's speaking in English. I understand English. So, and she's talking something about teaching and learning. It's not something that I have zero knowledge about, right? So this episodic buffer will then talk to the library, the long-term memory system. So in computer terms, it's pretty much like the storage, right? And it will then like link in with whatever the brain knows, whatever the brain has stored, and then, oh, she's talking about this thing, so I'm going to add more knowledge or new information about experience, and that's what she's saying up to this point, no? But now, let's say I'm here and I'm speaking in Russian, assuming that nobody understands Russian here, right? So as I'm speaking in Russian and I'm actually teaching everyone classical Russian, for example, right? So the CEO, the central executive, will take in this information, this auditory information, right? But then the board members don't really know what to do with it, right? And then it gets passed on to the episodic buffer, and which passes it on to the library. And then it's like, oh, we don't have, error, like file not found. We're not sure what to do. But as university lecturers, societal norms would then dictate you to just like look back at me in the face and just like maybe smile and nod and not sure what she's talking about, but I'm sure that I signed up for the wrong class, for example, right? So again, this is why, whatever input that you provide, right, will then create, it then creates a memory system. It creates a sort of a permanent imprint in your long-term memory, or it just dissipates. So here it says that the working memory is just long enough for you to hold on information, right? To process information and make sense of that information. And if it's kind of like important, you will keep it. If it's not important, it just goes away, right? So visual for visual, it just kind of like stays for about 1 or 2 seconds. And then for auditory, it stays on for about 4 seconds, right? And I guess the most powerful one is actually the smell. So that's why there's a lot of some growing research in learning sciences where we now actually also use olfactory as a, like a booster for learning or something like that, because it kind of like makes you kind of like remember things more because it creates a lasting imprint. All right. Now, imagine if like all you do in your 3-hour class is just lecture. And then imagine that what the students are seeing is actually just your slides and it's black and white, just like mine, it's black and white. It's just full of formulas. Like what kind of, well, they receive input, you see, and especially if it's a 14 week class and you decided to have like 11 weeks of online class, and they could just have it anywhere. So they may hear your voice in the headphones, but they're also maybe out there at IOI where there's so many other things going on, so all the senses are heightened. You see how like the attention is kind of like not there. And when the attention is not there, the working memory is not processing anything and nothing gets into the library, you see? And when nothing gets into the library, nothing gets recalled and nothing gets transferred. Right? So that's kind of like the basic like the basic knowledge about how the brain processes information. Now, for the people that are the community that I work with, which is neurodivergent children, autistic children, ADHD children, children with dyslexia, dyscalculia, those kind of people, we people, those kind of children, special needs children, these gifted children, right? They are um, they have a different kind of executive functioning, like a board member. So let's say for ADHD children, instead of having like one CEO, the ADHD brain actually has 10 CEOs, and these 10 CEOs want to talk all at the same time, and they're all calling shots all at the same time. And what you see as a teacher, as a parent, is someone who has divided attention. Now, as a teacher, then how do you then accommodate to this kind of learner? So for an autistic brain, for example, right? That brain is pretty much like the way it communicates socially is different. So, and for some reason, parts of the brain, that the executive functioning is one where it just wants to hyper focus on something. So that's why you see a lot of autistic, mild autistic, high functioning learners, right? They hyperfixate, they become like so good in something because everything else gets blocked out. All right. So something like that. Of course, I'm happy to talk more about this in a different session, but enough for you to understand that the experiences that you afford or not afford the students will actually play a role in what they capture, what captures their attention, what they will remember, what they will recall, and what they will transfer. So going back to the maths thing that I was saying just now, again, because our learning system, our education system highly focuses on procedural understanding, procedural memory, right? How to finish up this assignment, how to actually complete, how to actually answer the maths questions. That's when they get to university, they do engineering maths, they can't transfer the learning process because a lot of engineering maths at university level requires conceptual understanding, like really understanding the math concepts enough for you to then transfer into engineering problems. Right? And that's why you see a lot of engineering students struggle even in the first, second year, all right, because they need to kind of like transfer that learning, and that learning doesn't happen, that transfer doesn't happen because they lack the actual experience of understanding that concept properly. Okay. All righty. Moving on. So pretty much this is the key, the takeaway for this is that learning transfer requires experience, right? So you need to do, it forces us to come up with teaching with variation. You would need different problems. You would need different kinds of failure. You would need different kinds of solution, different angles at looking at the problem, or different angles at looking at the solution. All right. So this is what actually builds that transfer, that learning transfer. Because at the end of the day, our goal is not just to achieve the LOs, but what exactly we want the students to become beyond our subjects. All right. Now, I'm not, well, we're not surprised with all the KPI that we have, and because we're in a research university, and especially for those of you who are in the research track, the practitioner track, you would say that, well, teaching is not my forte and so on. But then again, without the students, without our programs, without our academic programs, universities will cease to exist. And if you say that, you just want to be a researcher, then maybe perhaps, there are other careers just focusing on being a research officer, right? So what I'm saying here is that understanding good practices in teaching is really non-negotiable, because it's really part and parcel of what we do, and it's actually a big part of our identity, and our core job, right? Regardless of whatever track your career is on, like whether it's the research track or the practitioner track and the teaching track, right? Okay. Now, this being that talking about this experiential learning, that experience is important, right? It's not just for the learner. This also applies for us as well as the teachers. We are the learner as well, right? So hold on. And this is the part where a lot of professional development courses for lecturers, right? They often skip on this part, the part that we are also the learner. We also need to learn about our experiences in teaching, right? In order for us to then be able to reflect on it and actually design better experiential learning experiences for the students, right? So if the students learn best through experience and through reflection, reflecting on their struggles, reflecting on their failures, right? Then we should learn to teach best through teaching. We should learn, sorry, we should learn to teach best through teaching experience and through the reflection as well. All right. But very, very, very rarely do we actually sit down and take a step back and really reflect on what exactly went right, what exactly went wrong. How can I improve this part? What can actually change, given the fact that, we now have younger Gen Zs, and, soon we'll have like Generation Alpha. So how do, as a millennial, like I'm an older millennial, right? How do we actually, connect with the students? Not about making reels though, So how can we make, how can we, get them to the level that we want them to get to their level, to the level that we want, while also, respecting that they actually come from a certain generation and have certain preferences, in learning, and so on. All right. So oftentimes, right, we repeat again and again and again and again until the next curriculum review. And then, kita ubah sikit-sikit ajalah curriculum ni. Nanti kalau kita ubah lebih daripada 30%, kena pula tukar course code. We have to change the course title, and that's just going to be time consuming. So let's just change about the references and so on, just say that we actually changed like 15%. And then come the new curriculum, and then we start teaching again and again, the same thing again and again. And for all you succumb to the ways our older lecturers did. And when we were younger, we swore that I'm not gonna, when I'm your age, I swear I won't be like you. But here we are, So what I'm saying here is that we need to have this conscious awareness. Well, awareness is awareness, but like conscious awareness is like real-time awareness about what needs to be changed. And after a class, like, ooh, that one really, that really worked. And why did it work? Why did it work for today? So those things, like conscious real-time awareness, is something that we rarely engage in. All righty. So before we move on to talking further about that lecture part, right? Let's kind of like pause for a bit, and I'll let you guys sit back and reflect on how to design one experiential learning activity for the students. Actually, I wasn't so sure who's gonna turn up. There's like 72 of us here, so I'm just assuming there's a mix of seniors and junior colleagues, new colleagues to UPM, new academics. So you might be wondering, like, I want to change something, but I'm not sure how. So let's try and do like one experiential learning for the students that you can use this semester, just one, and one that you can reflect on as a teacher. So just two activities for today. All right. So this is what I actually have. Hold on. Um, I'm gonna give you, oops. Uh, okay. So what I'm gonna do for this slide is that for this part is that I'm gonna give you a simple framework that you can use to convert any lecture heavy topic into an experiential activity. It doesn't matter like whether it's like super theoretical, or super non-visual, right? So this is kind of like a simple framework or a simple way of thinking about things on how you can actually just um, minimize and come up with the maximum output. I mean, that's just the kind of person that I am. I like to do the very bare minimum that actually really produce the real results. So what we usually do is that what I usually do, or what teachers normally do in schools and in classrooms, is that we teach something. We give an example, and let's do practice, 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 because practice makes perfect, and then I'll be assessing you, right? But when we talk about experiential learning, right? We are actually trying to tell the students that failing is okay. Now, the thing with that is that even as lecturers and especially as Asians, right, failing is never okay, right? Failing is unacceptable, all right? We need to get it right from the start. Um, but that's not what learning is. You see, learning pretty much, again, like I told you, is that getting something in, new input, processing it in the working memory, and it's memorable enough, right? Important enough for you to then store it in the brain. All right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it could be academic. You can be sharing like whatever fancy tool in class. So for example, like I work with little kids, and let's say, there's is it augmented reality, AR, where you point to a QR code or something, or there's an app, then like a 3D object will kind of like conjure in your app or something like that with the and then let's say the idea is actually to teach little kids ABCs, and the idea is to actually teach phonics, all right? So let's say apple, there, that's the traditional way of doing it. And then come educational technology, we have all these apps, and you can zoom into the apple, you can zoom out, zoom in, and then you can go and turn around and so on, right? Now, the students would actually, the learners, right? We're kind of like distracted with all the zooming in and zooming out and turning around and forgetting what exactly we're supposed to teach, right? And so my point here is that again, like no matter like how fancy the tools and so on are, it doesn't necessarily mean that the actual learning will take place. But when we talk about this failure, right? We always want to make sure that the students actually get it right, right from the start. We always want the students like, I can't tolerate like anything lower than A. So we rarely provide opportunities for the students to learn from their mistakes. So so like maybe tip number two, which is not documented here, right, is that if you want the learners to really remember um, like the experience, right, is that just allow them to make the mistakes. And what is more important is that what do you learn from those mistakes, so mistakes do not equal to failure. It's actually an opportunity for them to learn, but rarely in schools or in universities we allow for that failure to happen. So experiential learning is where you actually give them the problem first. It's kind of like reverse engineering, all right? And let them do it first. And then they will reflect on it. And then only you then teach the concept, So I've been trained by two prominent educational psychology departments. So again, if you want to know what educational psychology is actually the science, right, of the processes of teaching and learning. We try and understand the learning processes from the perspective of developmental psychology, from social psychological aspect, from cognitive psychological aspects, and how the learner develops over time, what they, how they develop physically, the social emotional part. enough for us to understand the learner to then be able to, design better learning experiences. So in the two schools that I was trained at Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and recently in my sabbatical at UW, University of Wisconsin-Madison, what I see in both of their school of thought is that you always have to allow for the learners to sit with things that are uncomfortable. But as Asians, Kasu is also another thing, right? We always want our learners to get it right from the start. We always want to baby them. This is the scaffold. And like SDS trainings. No offense though, but this is how the shortcut way of doing a literature review. This is the shortcut way of doing this. If you follow this rubric, this is what it is. So, and that's where the procedural learning happens, but not the conceptual understanding. And this then creates a disjoint between what the university produces, the kinds of students that the university produces versus what the industry wants or what the industry needs. So, Talent Corp has always been saying like they don't master the concepts enough for them to translate to real world problems out there that the industry needs. All right. So we rarely let students sit with things that are uncomfortable. So the key word here is you reverse it, problem first, and then let them do it, and then they reflect, and then you teach the concept. All right. So this is a framework that I just made up for this talk, but you can trust me because, I'm a learning scientist and I think it's legit, right? So, this is a memory, what do you call it? Like a memory technique, right? Chunking and, keywords so that you remember. So keep it real. So the real framework is a framework that you can use and I can use because I just created this, right? To think about like a learning moment in your subject the upcoming semester, right? What is it that I can actually change and make it better? So remember when I started the talk, right, 40 minutes ago, I said that we have the CBT TNL framework, the 5 pillars and how we have to progress across the stages in each of the pillars to become this wholesome academic, right? So continuous improvement is non-negotiable. And as a learning scientist, my advice to you is that learning experiences, experiential learning experiences is non-negotiable in getting you there, all right, as a teacher or as an educator. So real, R is a real problem or question. So you start with something students have to figure out, not something you explain first, all right? So let them figure out. So in my cognitive psychology class, we have a lot of cognitive experiments. So I let them just like go through that experiment first. I would create that situation first, whatever the topic that I'm teaching, visual imagery or memory components and things like that, right? So I let them figure it out first without actually naming that this is the experiment for this, and this is what you're supposed to see. And if you're not seeing it, what could it be? So let them figure things out first and don't go off explaining most of the time, especially my graduate students who are private university lecturers, right? I asked them like, how do you teach and so on, right? And then they said, oh, it's just easy. We were given like a bunch of slides and we just have to kind of like read it in the class, like read it in the class. So it's very easy. And I'm like, oh no, that's not teaching, right? That's not teaching. But I'll leave that to you. So E is encounter the concept through doing. So students engage with the idea through action, not through lecture, like what you guys are doing right now, like just through lecture. Analyze what happened, structured reflection on what they did and why it worked or failed. Like these days we have AI, so things are not as hard as it used to be. If you're just like talking to one personalized chatbot that you create to help you with your teaching, like help me become a better teacher or something like the chatbot, right? So you can just like start off a thread where you document your teaching journey with this chatbot, whether you plug it in. I think GPT would be a good one, right? I'm not sure if Claude can do it though. Yeah, so you can kind of like create like a chatbot that just kind of like helps you reflect on your teaching journey across the years. So you use this framework and then you just have to type it and then you can obtain the feedback from AI. I mean that's one good use of AI as well, right? So and then analyze what happened, structured reflection and what they did, why it worked or failed, and then you can ask AI what do you think it failed and why do you think it's not working, and link to theory or the concept. So you name the concept explicitly after they've experienced it. All right, so now your turn. Why don't we take like maybe 5 minutes? So like let's take this as a kind of like our break time. Pick one topic you teach, maybe next semester, that students consistently struggle with. How could you turn it into a real activity? All right, real as an experiential activity. So what's the real problem or question? How could students encounter the concept through doing it? All right, what would you ask them to reflect on? And when would you introduce the formal theory or the concept? All right. So feel free to kind of like talk to your AI or something, and then we can get back in about 5 minutes. All right. Okay, cool. All right, friends. Let me just go into this, right? Okay. Maybe because the session is short, and if we actually were to do this as a face-to-face, we can chat, we can talk, we can discuss in groups. But again, in the interest of time, I decided not to do like breakout rooms or anything like that because this is a non-technical session. All right, so let me see what I have with me. What do I want to show? Maybe I'll just grab something. Okay. I'll show you like how real the real framework like the way I imagine it right, like okay, I need to kind of like have a simple experiential learning for my students in class, right? So remember when we talk about effective teaching, no amount of technological tool can compensate a bad teacher and a lazy teacher. All right. It requires you to really be thoughtful about the curriculum, about making efforts with the delivery and how it actually aligns with the curriculum and the learning outcomes, and how you actually thoughtfully assess the students in terms of how you actually design the tests and so on. Right. Sometimes you teach the curriculum is something else, you teach something else, and then the exam is something else, and then students get B's and C's. It's just really not fair, to be honest, right? So again, the keyword there is that good teaching does not necessarily have to be something out of the world and something grand. It just requires thoughtful process. All right. So this real framework, imagine like, okay, what's one thing today that I want to create an spiritual learning experience for my students? I'll give you an example, like for my class, right? I have something called like in cognitive psychology, we have something called visual memory and visual imagery. So just now I showed you like what you see and then how that then, the working memory processes it, right? So the thing with our brain is that what you see, let's say this is my old speaker, my Sony speaker, right? So what you see is different from what you imagine. Now, learning sciences or learning science research has shown that if you have if you have powerful visual imagery skills, right? That then gives you an advantage in courses like engineering, civil engineering, in biology, medicine, when you actually have to visualize what's in their stomach and so on, and especially architecture, design. So, in other words, people like me, we want to know how best we can actually improve visual imagery skills. But first, I have to teach these teachers about what visual imagery is. So how do I actually give my students, my cognitive psychology class students, right, understand the importance of this visual imagery and how it's different from what you see. So that's just pretty much the concept that I want to teach. So when I say visuals, right? Visual memory, right? It's about me showing you the speaker, right? And you're seeing it. So you can see it, right? There you go. You can see it. Oh, this is a really bad example. This is black. That's in my notebook here. Oh no, that's another bad example because the background's not working. So this is a pen, it's a Sharpie pen, it's a regular gel Sharpie pen. All right, and I'm gonna show it to you. I don't know what the mirroring is. I'm not sure what's wrong with my laptop here today. But well, this is my pen, right? And you're seeing it, right? This is visual. This is visual memory, and you can, you're processing it as a visual input. Now, but I'm not telling my students all of this just yet. I'm just showing them to just look at the pen, and then I put this pen away. So I told them, like, okay, you're looking at this, you can examine it, and so on. And then now take out a piece of paper, right? Well, you can do it too if you want, but I will then tell them, right? This is me setting the real problem of the question. So now, in your blank pieces of paper, I want you to, as accurately as possible, right? Without me showing the pen anymore, I want you to draw it from your mental memory, right? Now that's visual imagery, basically. So students will then have to start recalling it. Now they know that they have to they will have initially have to focus on it. So now that if they now know that they didn't focus, so now, like, oh my gosh, what was it? Was it a black pen? Was it even a pen? Was it a pencil? Right? They have to figure it out and so on. And then when they draw, then I will then show it back, right? And that's when they realize that, okay, now I get it, that what you see and what you see is not similar as to how you imagine it, right? So, and my point there is that the more learners, remember, I'm teaching like teacher trainers, right? I'm teaching educational psychologists. So I tell my students that the more the learners know how to visualize things as accurately as possible, as detailed as possible, that then gives them a competitive edge in certain areas of certain academic areas, like better engineers, better architects, and better everything, basically, like when you can actually mentally visualize. Now the challenge then to them is that how do you create curriculum and teaching delivery that really focuses on honing these skills. And I would assume that in engineering education, I don't quite think that they would actually have like this awareness about like how that visual imagery skills actually plays a huge role in certain areas like civil and mechanical and so on, right? Okay, and then so they analyze what happened, what exactly like how like why there are differences in visual input versus like visual imagery conjured in the head, right? And they're linked to theory. Now, just a fun fact, right? Kids with dyslexia, right, with reading difficulties, right? Research has shown that they have a in general, not saying that all, this is not blanketing, but in general, students with dyslexia have lower working memory capacity and speed. Just now that working memory that I showed you, right? So they generally have lower processing speed and capacity in the sense that if it's a computer, it's perhaps like Intel i3 in Dr. Masnida's language, right? Intel i3 with a 4 gig RAM. It's kind of like small and slow, right? But God has bestowed on them like really good visual imagery skills. Their spatial ability, their 3D skills is normally good. So if you have a dyslexic child, so again, now this is input from educational psychology. So if you have a dyslexic child, wanting them to become lawyers, would be an uncomfortable experience for both the parent and the child, like because the child struggles with reading. And this is a permanent thing, because permanent as in that you were born with it. It's a neurodevelopmental condition, right? You just learn how to become better and maximize your and learn strategies on how to overcome it, but it's just always there, all right? Just like autism, it will just always be there. But how do you improve your conditions and symptoms and your functions and your behavioral functions and so on? So if you know that that's the mental makeup of that child, then we would then encourage them to go into fields where 3D skills is required, like interior design or architecture and things like that. All right. So that's why it's important to study about the learner and not like see things as a problem, more like how do we accommodate to these diverse kinds of learners. All right. Something that UPM is yet to address, like being inclusive and understanding that there are different learner profiles, not just in terms of that how they like to learn. I know like a lot of educational technology advancements like to address on what's your learning preference. Are you visual? Are you kinesthetic? But more importantly is like what's their cognitive profile is like. Are they dyslexic? Are they actually, because not everyone actually, these are invisible challenges. So not everyone will actually have like, oh, I'm an OKU, So a lot of mild, high functioning autistic children actually go on to become super brilliant. And then they go into universities, but they will have, marked differences in how they communicate. Now, from there, sometimes lecturers would start to label, like, you're a bit rude and you don't get along well with the others and so on. So again, this is why I say that we have to, understand the sciences of learning, the sciences of like how different brains processes information differently. Now, how can we actually create different and meaningful learning experiences for different learner profiles, right? Okay. So that's pretty much one way that you can actually, just a quick way. Oh, this real framework, real problem. What's the question? What's the thing that you want them to experience? They encounter that concept by doing it, because when they do, they can actually see it. They can listen to their friends. So the more senses you use, the more the memory gets activated, if I can put it that way. All right. And then they analyze what happened and then you link it to theory. All right. Okay. Now the next one would be part 3, the method for lecturers, right? How to reflect systematically on your teaching. So the keyword here is reflect, right? And the keyword here is systematically, all right? Hold on. Okay. Now, when we talk about reflect, right? So reflect is actually a very common word, especially among Muslims, right? We call it muhasabah. Kita kena muhasabah. Kita kena muhasabah. Like that. But what really is muhasabah, right? And because it's a common, Malay Muslim kind of like, oh, kita kena muhasabah diri. But so we rarely think of it as a higher order thinking process, when actually reflection, how do I say this? Simply, the end goal of learning most of the time, all right, I'm trying to put it very like non-theoretical. The end goal of learning is for you to reach insight, insight learning. Insight learning is when, let's say when we were in school last time, right? When we were in forms 1, 2, 3, right? We're just playing around and so on and so forth. And then we just learn science. And then when we get to form 4 and form 5, we learn like super hard stuff like biology, chemistry, physics, add maths, right? We rarely we rarely can piece things together and look at it from a bird's eye view. But as we go into universities, right, and we learn harder stuff, and that's when we're like, aha, now it makes sense, So insight learning is everyone's goal. And it's basically like mastering that piece of subject. So much so that you see things at a bird's eye view. Like if statistics, you can actually see like, oh, these are like the descriptives and these are like the inferentials, and the inferentials, you actually have comparisons, you have predictions, you have this and this and this, and you have the modeling, the hierarchical modeling, so you can see things from a bird's eye view instead of like, I know regression, so I'm just gonna like stick to whatever research design that uses regressions, and at best I'll do like maybe SEMs or, like regressions and correlations, you kind of like, you just kind of like still there. So insight learning is when, you're really on the top. And to get to the top, to get to be a master in what you do, which is everyone's goal technically, right? Is every academic's goal to reach mastery. Like becoming a professor is being able to profess in your field and not just to like like check all the boxes and making sure that you have everything. So being a professor in its real, truest sense is being able to profess in something. So you want to reach insightful learning. And the non-negotiable path to reaching insight learning, being insightful about something is through reflection. Um, Now, in our educational psychology textbook, so again, educational psychology is about turning teachers into, efficient, effective teachers slash parents. So that's what we teach in the first topic in our educational undergraduate textbook is that how to become an effective teacher. And if you look across all educational psychology textbook, it will tell you one thing, which is like the one single thing to become an efficient, effective teacher is reflection. It's through reflection. There's no other way. If you are not able to reflect on your teaching, what goes right and what goes wrong, what can be improved, and what exactly do my students need? So for example, my before COVID, right? My classes consisted of, I would say, like 90% local students and maybe like actually less than 10% international students. Now it's the reverse. Now it's like 95% from international students and sometimes even less than 5% of local students, right? And then not just that, because I'm primarily a graduate level lecturer because my program is only at the graduate level. The EdSec is a graduate level program. So pre-COVID, I used to teach about 23 students per class. But these days, I teach like two classes of the same subject. So there's one subject I have to open it to two classes and they're all maxed to the brim. So it's like 40 in this class and 35 sometimes in this class. And I would say, again, it's 95% international students. And out of that 95%, it's basically 95% from China, basically, that is my real problem. If I teach in my old ways and my old expectations, no matter how there was a lot of experiential learning going on pre-COVID, right? If I were to continue those ways, it will just not work. And my serious issue is about student engagement. They're not engaged because they don't know how to speak English, but it's not my job to teach English, you see? So those are the real things. But and I can choose the shortcut way of just like whatever, I'm a lecturer. It doesn't matter. But either I waste my time and that time, or I can actually sit back and really think, how do I go about in improving engagement for students who are struggling, generally struggling with English, right? Generally struggling with even understanding well, they come from non-psychology backgrounds. They also come from non-education backgrounds. So there's a lot of things, right? So either I sit down and reflect on all these challenges, or I can just go back to my old ways and just whatever, and I still get paid anyway, that, right? So reflection is non-negotiable. But the thing is, we rarely do it systematically. We rarely actually take action upon what we reflect on. All right. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I think that thing works. Oh, I think that was just a bummer in my class. And that was just it. So I hold on. So again, I forgot to show this slide while doing the talking. So again, what I wanted to say is that most of the time we would just say, oh, I had a good class. I think the students actually liked the topic, or I think the students liked the assignment, just pretty much that. But we need more than just like that went right, that went wrong, or maybe I'll just try again or whatever. We need something that's structured. And therefore, I created this thing. Again, I just made it up again. I made this one up, but I'll be using it. So, this is not just kind of like just conjuring things out of nowhere. Um, So if just now we want to keep it real so that the students can have meaningful learning experiences, bite-sized meaningful experiences, this one is a minor. Minor means like bukan mind, like mind your business or that thing. Mine as in like Mine's Wonderland, like mining, a data mining, right? So mind the experience, like cari gali your experience, Remember, I just said just now that if you want to be good with giving students meaningful experiential learning, experiential learning experiences, um, you as the educator, you would also need to be that learner. So most of the time, being a good learner to become a better teacher is not about learning more tools and more tools and more pedagogies and adopting a new religion of framework, this and that and so on. But it's really, you you already have it. You already lived those experiences. And all you have to do is just kind of like sit and reflect and recall the teaching moments that you would want to improve. So I know for a fact that when I start doing something, when we talk about cognitive psychology, everything is just super abstract. Prof. Samsila, for those of you who know, she's my senior colleague. She teaches cognitive development, child and adolescent. No, sorry, she teaches child and adolescent development. So that's child development. So everybody loves it. It's like, oh, they get to see babies and they get to do case studies about how babies develop cognitively, physically, emotionally, and so on. And they go to my class and we talk about all these random experiments that's most of the time computer based and it goes on in the head and you can't see. All right. So um, there are definitely moments. So what I'm saying is that my class is really super abstract in the grand scheme of things in psychology. So I would then, like most of the time what I do is like I would really like zoom into like how can I make this section better? And then I would then think about like why it worked or why it failed. You need to identify what worked, what failed, what teaching principle was confirmed or violated. Did I explain too much or was I prompting too much? Were the students not even engaged in the first place? So that's classroom management. So maybe tip number 3, 4, I'm not sure, I've lost count. But another unrecorded tip is that a good teacher is a good classroom manager. If you can't manage your classrooms, right, you by default have failed teaching. In other words, if in your class you're lecturing or doing something, like you think that you're doing something meaningful in the class, but half of the class is actually playing with the phones, distracted watching Netflix or something, right? Or just walking in and out of your class, then you by default have failed as a teacher. So in our like what do you call that? Latihan mengajar. So like for those of you non-education, you have like industrial training, right? Practicum, right? So our teacher trainees, right? By default, if a student goes out of the classroom, well, when we go and observe, and if by default we see that a student um, leaves the classroom, not asking for permission from the teacher trainee, or if the classroom is just the management of the classroom is just chaotic, they by default will have failed that session. All right, so that's how important classroom management is. If you can't manage a group of humans in a certain period of time, like let's say that's a 1 hour lecture or a 3 hour lecture or a 2 hour lecture, if they're just doing whatever they're doing and you don't care, again, you by default would have failed. All right, so you identify what teaching principle has actually been violated, or what again, what went right, what went wrong, and then you name that domain. Now, this is the one that I would want to kind of like tap to CADE's CBT TNL framework. All right. It's a lovely framework for you to actually kind of like follow. It's not too prescriptive. It's just there that tells you as a guideline, these are the things that you would kind of like want to fulfill across the stages of your career in order for you to reach that professorship in your areas, right? So it says, name the domain. So which aspect of teaching does this touch? Is it curriculum? Is it delivery? Is it the assessment, right? Has this got to do with mentoring the student and so on? So you can use that CBT naming system and then evidence it. What artifact can I prove this insight and reuse it? So again, if that thing happens in another class or, if it applies in another topic for the course, then we reuse it. I think yang paling saya pantang adalah when things have exist and then we just keep reinventing the wheels, right? In our innovation competitions, nothing wrong with that. I'm always a jury of one of those competitions. In fact, I was one of the ones who actually started off Pictel with Dr. Wan Sohanis years back. That name, I still remember the day that we actually came up with that Pictel name, the Putra Inno Creative Branding, somewhat in 2018-ish, I think. So again, if something can be reused, you reuse it. So I think in the chat box just now, you said that you remember a core memory that you remember from school was that good teachers are good storytellers. And I have to agree with that. You know why? Regardless of whatever religion you come from, if you believe in God and you believe in a religious scripture, so for Muslims like me, right, we read the Quran. More than half of the Quran, so the Quran, right? The Quran, the Bible, the Torah, right? These are teaching scriptures, right? They teach humans to become better, right? So in other words, there's divine pedagogy in there, right? So again, as a learning scientist, I normally when I read the Quran, I would oftentimes try to look at how does God actually teaches us a certain things. So if he wants to teach us like not to do things, how would he do it? Like what are the kinds of ayah that what's the tone of the sentences or the ayahs that God uses? And when you talk about story, right? More than half of the Quran is all about stories, which also means that by design, humans are wired to remember stories, to remember good stories. And this is also why I remember the Jalan Iti and the Kena Cubit and all, because it makes good stories to tell other people, you know. But yes, stories is kind of like one super underrated pedagogical tool. If you can actually tell or simplify or analogize your engineering or computer science concepts into stories, right? That's what makes things stick in the head, enough for it to be recalled, enough for it to be transferred. All right, so the minor framework is one for you to kind of like do that structured reflection, because reflection is non-negotiable in order for you to reach insight, if that makes sense. Okay. So that's pretty much what mine is. So now your turn. I would not be able to actually see what you do, but go ahead and grab a piece of paper, or maybe you can just head over to your preferred AI, Gemini or Claude. I personally like Claude, or your super trained GPT, right? Think of one teaching moment from the past year that stuck with you, and you can walk through the minor concept that I just kind of like conjured for this talk. All right, so let's do that in about 5 minutes until maybe 11, or 7 minutes, maybe until 11:30. All right, I'll let you sit in. If you're like me and you haven't done your teaching packet yet for next week, then maybe this is about time that you can actually think things through. Okay. Alrighty, 11:30 it is, and I will resume and go on and move on to the last leg of our session. All right. Of course, you might not actually, maybe you won't be able to kind of like do the deep thinking within the 7 minutes that I gave you, right? But I can assure you that minor to me, like the way I see it, the way when I kind of like, scratch things or like how sketch things, like what's the bare minimum that someone can do to really quickly reflect that would be efficient enough for them to make changes, significant changes in their classroom. I would say it will only take like about 20 minutes max. And once per semester, like about right about now, when we're trying to finalize our teaching plans and teaching packets for the upcoming semester, right? So all you have to do is just like, it's just 20 minutes per semester. That's the least you can do, to improve on your teaching. All right. So recently, this was actually last year before I went off for sabbatical. I actually redesigned my memory lecture to start with a chunking demo. So previous year I'd lecture first and then demo. But again, this time I reversed it. So this was actually what I then actually did for the real activity. So minor actually is you reflecting and then you then execute it and then there's your real and that becomes your audit. All right. So students then understood chunking faster, because they felt the problem before I explained the solution. And the principle here is confusion. I wanted them to feel confused. And during my sabbatical, actually, I just completed my sabbatical several months back. I just came back. But I decided to go to class. I decided to go to my mentor's class. I attended as a full-time graduate student, and at times I was also co-instructing. But so he's one of these prominent learning scientists, learning analytics to be precise. So he likes to let us sit being confused, making all the mistakes, and there's just some really super hard mathematical modeling actually. So the coding, the segmenting, doing automated classifiers. I didn't really know how to code, to be honest, but he let us sit with the confusion. He let us reflect, as we were being confused with all the things that he asked us to do, but then so that when he then explains things, right, the resolution creates that stronger learning than you explaining first. So that's something that I would want to carry across in the upcoming semester. I would want to see the students confused. But before that, I will actually have to address a more fundamental issue with my class, which is like the 95% international students. Who's primarily here not really to study, if I can be honest with you. So I have to address that one, before I can, go on to these higher things. So that's something this week that I'm going to be reflecting on, and just like basic student engagement, and then name, this touches innovative delivery. So as we go along and when we talk about documenting our continuous improvements, innovation. So when we do Pictal innovations, right, it's not like, oh, there's this new tool. I want to try it out. I want to try it out in my class, and I'm just gonna capture it and maybe take some data, and I'm gonna go into the competition. And by default, I can get a bronze medal. But if I get silver and gold, why not try? That is fine too, but that's not really how the actual reflective teaching works. So reflective teaching is like really reflecting on a problem, identifying that problem, and then how would we want to change it, and then what kind of pedagogical skills will confirm the way we're going to teach it, or what deviated, what went wrong, and what teaching design, or what teaching method actually deviated from as to why the students were not getting what they were supposed to be learning, right? And then you now document it. So you have, being a structured documentation, you come up with an innovation, and that's when it's stable enough, when it's replicable enough that other people can also use it, and that's when you go to competition saying that these are my best practices. Well, hopefully that's how we do things, and then there's evidence. I have before and after student quizzes and so on, and then scores improved, engagement improved, attention improved. There's cognitive engagement, there's behavioral engagement, there's also emotional engagement. So 3 types of engagement that you would want to look at, not just like scores. Scores is just the cognitive engagement. All right. And you also have student reflections or quotes and so on. All right. And then reuse. The keyword here is, if it's good practice, we need to reuse it. We need to actually share with other people, because that's what being a good teacher is about, right? Okay. So now we move on to the final part of our talk today, which is the mirror. What I wanted to highlight here is that one cannot exist without the other. If we're talking about experiential learning, we have to be an experiential learner ourselves as the teacher, or as the educator, or as the lecturer instructor. All right. You can't do part 2, which is the real activity just now, without part 3, which is without mining your own and reflecting on your own teaching processes. All right. Modeling experiential teaching requires being an experiential learner yourself. So just to recap, real for the students, right? And minor for you as the instructor are mirror processes. Real asks students to experience and then to reflect and then to understand and then apply, right? Learning transfer, right? And minor, as the teacher asks you to experience, to reflect, to understand, and also to apply. Experience is in like experience that teaching itself. If you're always pawning off the teaching to your RAs or TAs, and what are we even doing? All right. Um, hold on. So what I want to highlight here is that the Excel framework just now really highlights on why we need to make sure that moving forward, in whichever way we design the curriculum, it has to be highlighting on immersive learning experiences for the students. And then here's UPM telling you that we have that CBT TNL framework that tells you this is how we're training the lecturers to become experiential learning designers. Okay. And then the non-negotiable part, now this is kind of like my takeaway, right? And I touched on this earlier, right? Some of us might be thinking, I'm on the research practitioner track. Teaching is just 20% of my job. Do I really need to do all these structured things? Do I even need to do all these continuous improvements? Because, the students are all giving me like high marks for the teaching evaluation anyway. But if you and I, we can be honest, you look at the teaching, the items in the teaching evaluation form, there's even one that says like the teacher is presentable in a professional manner, like the way they dress, the way they speak. And even so, some students, just for the heck of it, can actually just, rate you as 1, like as if you actually came to class with pajamas or something, so that can be like super vague, and depending on how the students actually even care to actually look at the items properly. So I wouldn't say that the evaluation is a concrete way to reflect on how effective your teaching was. All right. So what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not saying that you should win teaching awards. It's nice to go to that level, but that's kind of like not the goal. All right. I'm saying that if we're standing in front of a group of students, a crowd of students, a hall of students, and we're responsible for designing the courses that they take, because curriculum review is kind of like part and parcel of our job as well, right? So if we're involved in these things and we're responsible for these things, then by default, we have a responsibility to do it well, And by doing well, what I mean is that we're learning from the experience. We're learning from our experience of what went right and what went wrong, what could be better, what could actually be just like sacrifice. Like, no matter how this tool is super cool and everyone's using it, but if it actually distracts the learning process for your students, then by all means, you have to call the shots and not use it in your class. This is similar to the one that I said about little children learning ABCs and phonics and actually using too much of technology and getting distracted by the technology and not really learning the phonics itself. So let's say Discord, for example, just makes your students go astray instead of really engaging in productive dialogic discourse, then by all means, you need to actually sit back and reflect on the role of discourse use in your class, Discord use in your class, for example, right? So my point here is again, sitting back and reflecting on your lesson plan, the curriculum, the delivery, and the assessment. It's not supposed to be a burden. Doing this teaching packet is not supposed to be a burden. This rancangan pengajaran is not supposed to be a burden. It's just basic, the bare minimum professionalism that you're supposed to uphold since you decided to be in this job. right? So I think that students deserve teachers who actually, reflect on their teaching. And if we're not willing to do that, I do think that we're in the wrong job. All right. So again, this is kind of like the framework for Excel. We actually have a playbook. I can actually pass this over to Jeevan or to Azri, and then we can actually share it with the participants here today in case this is the first time you're listening to this or you're hearing this. But I do want to highlight this is a curriculum level framework. It capitalizes on experiential learning. So depending on the kinds of field, the strength of your field, the nature of your field, some are like more industry based, some are like more research based, some are like more community based. But you can look at all these skills, what you can actually embed and what's still missing and what can be improved in your teaching packet, right? In reaching your learning outcomes, right? So that you kind of like align with whatever KPT is doing. Well, sometimes we would say, I don't agree with KPT. I don't agree with UPM. But the thing is, we work for UPM and we work for KPT. So if UPM and KPT is going this way and we're going this way, what are we even doing, right? We're not stuck. We're not a tree. If things just don't sit well with you, I think we do have other options, I think, right? But to me personally, I think this is a super thoughtful framework. And even if we can't use this at a curriculum level where all programs, all at the program level, we're adopting this, we can actually adopt this at our course level to the very least. And again, this is the Putra Creative. It's a playbook. I'll reshare it with Azreen. So these two things can be kind of like your guidance. Like, so if I'm reflecting on this, teaching process, where does it fit in my journey as an academic? All right. Okay, so again, experience, reflection equals to growth, and growth equals to learning. All right. Now, the thing with learning that I want you to remember is that learning is whatever that gets into your working memory, that's processing your working memory through your five senses, right? Remember, if it's meaningful enough, if it's experiential enough, right? If it's uncomfortable, you will remember it, right? If it's like boring, you will remember it, right? Because at the core of our brain, we have the amygdala. This is the emotional part of the brain. Now, if our emotions are triggered, right? If someone triggers you and you get angry, right? It's an emotional thing, right? The amygdala starts to fire up. And most of the time, your higher order brain, which is the working memory, the executive functioning, and the prefrontal cortex is kind of like Windows shut down, or it kind of like hangs, like a window freeze, and the amygdala takes over, right? And your emotional brain starts to ring. Now, this is separate from what I'm trying to say, but this is why we say never make permanent decisions when you're angry, never go shopping while you're hungry, because your higher order thinking brain, the working memory, is kind of like on pause, or it just kind of like mental shutdown. So you also remember, right, when you're super stressed, you kind of like forget things. You miss things, you're supposed to go to the post office, but you went straight home, or for example, so your working memory space, the 4 gig RAM or the 8 gig RAM or whatever, the processing speed, stress eats that up. Lack of sleep eats that up. But my point here is, if we talk about that emotional brain and put it in the context of experiential learning, if you can ignite enough emotions in your classroom, it will stay. The learning will stick, because when, senses, the sensory input, when coupled with emotions, and stories are good in evoking emotions, anger, sadness, being uncomfortable, that sticks. That becomes your core memory. And that's why, of all the things that I remember from my physics class when I was in Form 4, is like kambing jatuh gaung. Like whatever the concept was, I don't know, but I remember the story well enough until I'm 40 now. So again, for students, real style activities for lecturers, minor style reflection. Okay. And if you can insert like the right dose of emotions, that will make learning stick. All righty. Now, this is the last one. It's like 15 minutes to go. So we're hitting the right spot. Just so that I know that all of you have been listening to me and I haven't been talking to the screen alone, right? What's one word takeaway that you will start doing differently next week? That if you've been listening, what's one word? It doesn't have to be one sentence or a phrase, just one word. You can hit the chat box and we'll go through that really quickly before we pass over the session back to Dr. Masnida. All right. So I'll wait for your responses to come in and then I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap the session up. Oh, Dr. Pushpa, you say real and minor. Okay. All right. What else? Anyone? There's like 60 people in here. What's a one takeaway that you will remember? If you don't remember anything that I say, if you don't remember this real and this minor thing, what's one thing that you remember from this talk? Otherwise, I think I'll like I've been talking for nothing. What's one thing that you will take away from this talk into your classroom next week? Anyone?
Dr. Aini Marina, I remember many things until I feel that I'm feeling the momentum. Like I can't wait to face my class next week to apply all the framework tips that you're giving it
Okay.
through the share,
If there
session.
is one, if there is one thing that I want you to remember, do not remember me as a framework person because I am not a framework person. I was just trying to kind of like simplify things, if I can put it that way. All right, experience, reflection, right? Anything else? Oh, I see my friends in here as well. Hello, guys. Reorganize. Yeah, reorganize your thought, restructure. I mean, don't be afraid about like changing, right? Like the only constant thing is change. Change is the only constant thing. All right. I'll show you. Oops. Let me go ahead and change my slide. Right. Actually, the word I was looking for, which everything is correct. Obviously, compartmentalizing, reflect. If there is one key takeaway is that reflection is non-negotiable. If you want to create experiential learning experiences, right? You really have to do this muhasabah thing, and it has to be in a structured way. It has to be in a way that you can then take action on it. And muhasabah is not enough if there's no action. Like there's no point in reflecting and talking about things if action does not follow, right? And I will then lead you to my final slide. That we remember experiences, we don't remember fancy slides, right? Well, the only reason why this does not justify my simple slides, the thing is I'm not creative, right? I don't know how to use like all these fancy terbang-terbang gifs or whatever. So my slides are always just like this because not because not because like I have anything against fancy slides, but sometimes I feel that no amount of slides can substitute a bad teaching or a bad teaching content or a bad teaching delivery or poor preparations, right? So last but not least, teach in ways that your brain and the soul were designed to learn. So if the brain can only handle this amount of information, then why do we need to actually like, like just info dump everything to the students, so we need to understand how the brain works in order for you to actually teach better. Okay. And with that, I will pass the floor back over to my colleague, Dr. Masnida. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aini Marina. Very interesting sharing. Exciting to hear from one slide to another slide to get what Dr. Aini Marina want to share for us. Do you guys agree with me? Very give us some more momentum to get ready for next semester begin. Okay.
Right.
Thank you again, Dr. Aini Marina, for the excellent sharing session. Uh,
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
Later soon, maybe next semester or next year, we will invite again Dr. Aini Marina. Maybe that time we will
InsyaAllah.
have the face-to-face session. I believe Dr.
Saya
Marina
dapat
have a lot
I
of
dapat surat JK, so I cannot say no, can I? So
All right,
Ah,
because
yeah,
we need Dr. Marina experience because they're very good at the grooming the teachers, grooming the lecturers to become the
inshallah.
uh, teachers. Okay, so with that, thank you, Dr. Marina, and all the participants. Can have you enter take your attendance through the online
I
form?
haven't taken my attendance yet.
No
But
need because you are for two one hour
I
without
would,
this
well,
enough
I
or
thought people came
enough
for
enough
CPD
evidence.
points, so I want CPD points too.
That's enough evidence for you, Dr. Marina.
All
Um,
right.
um, the recording session we will put in our website, CADe-Lead website, and also in the Facebook. So everyone
Mm-hmm.
can watch again all the sharing of component and the item that we shared before this, and listen back all those story from Dr. Aini Marina. Okay, okay, maybe the last session. Maybe can we take a picture?
Sure.
Maybe everyone. I I allow you to open your camera. Azri, can you help me to take a picture? Can everyone open switch on your camera?
Boleh Dr. kita
Okay,
tunggu
we
sebentar
have
lagi.
3 pages, Azri.
3 pages.
Okay, mohon
Azri, can you
semua.
help me? Okay, okay, right.
Boleh Dr. Kita
Okay,
tunggu
okay,
sekejap lagi.
okay.
Okay, semua dah buka ke?
Not yet. Some open. We have actually 73 before this. Maybe some of them
Mm-hmm.
already leave for maybe for early lunch. Okay.
Of course.
Okay, 1,
That's a
2,
basic human need.
3. Okay, one more. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, Dr.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much,
So we meet
friends.
again
All the
in
best
other
for the
webinar
upcoming
series and
classes.
maybe the face-to-face series session with Dr. Animal later. Okay. Stay
Inshallah.
tuned, everyone.
Terima
Okay.
Oh,
kasih.
gee, main.
Assalamualaikum.
Marina.
Uh,